Welcome to the Chromatek Watercolor tutorial series. This course will give you a rock-solid foundation in the fundamental techniques of watercolor painting, developing transferable skills that you'll immediately be able to apply to your own work. It's designed for absolute beginners, but there's loads of stuff here for experienced painters too. Almost all the tutorials have a practice element and a painting element. If you're already familiar with the techniques, then you can skip the practice part and crack straight on with the painting. If you find yourself struggling with techniques that you've not yet covered, then circle back and try some of the earlier lessons. Unlike standalone tutorials that only teach you one painting or one style, every lesson in this course builds upon the skills you've learnt in the previous lesson in a logical and highly structured way, and concentrates on providing you with skills that can immediately be applied to other paintings. The fastest way to learn any new skill is to break it down into manageable steps, so we also provide templates for every lesson. We want to teach you how to paint, not how to draw, and by removing that additional burden from the learning process, we allow you to focus on the exact skills that you're trying to develop. Watercolor is a fantastic medium that can easily produce amazing results, given the right guidance. And regardless of where you are on your watercolor journey, by the time you've finished all of these 6 lessons, I guarantee you'll be a better painter than you are now. If you find yourself watching any tutorial where the presenter claims that their technique is the best, then they're talking total rubbish. There are many different ways to perform most watercolor techniques. The ones presented in this course are just the ones I find easiest, and they yield the best results for me, but you may find that another way suits you better. Explore, experiment, and have fun. The whole point of this is for you to discover how you can create the effects and therefore the paintings that you want to create. This is not so much a rulebook as it is an introductory guide, and ultimately the best techniques out there are going to be the ones that work for you. Okay, having said that about the rules, there is one rule. Use watercolor paper. It will make far more difference to your painting than any other factor. If you use regular printer paper, then you won't be able to blend properly and the paper will become warped, causing pooling of paint. If you find that you're struggling to reproduce the techniques in these videos, it's almost certainly the paper to blame. Let's take a look at your workspace. Here's the things you're going to need. Good lighting, water activated tape or masking tape, a board to tape your paper to and something to prop it up on, 2 jars of water, tissue paper and a palette. And here's what all that stuff is for. You'll need the tape to stick your paper to your board. This will prevent the paper warping, especially if you stretch it first. It's worthwhile learning how to stretch the paper too, so make sure to check out the tutorial linked in the description. For some of our tutorials, we'll only be painting a small area of the paper, so it's not essential to tape your paper down for these. If you're using a strong tape, then you can stick it to your clothing or a clean, lint-free towel first, to remove a little of its stickiness. Then when you come to remove it from the paper, it won't tear. 2 jars of water, 1 for dirty water and 1 for clean water. When you're painting and you want to switch colours, you need to thoroughly clean your brush to ensure that none of the old colour contaminates the new one. To make sure your brush is clean, wash it in the dirty water first and then wash it in the clean water. Tissues are for correcting any mistakes or for drying off the brush. Q-tips are also a great way to correct small mistakes. Finally, you need a palette to mix paint on, ideally with several large wells and several smaller ones, so that you can mix up enough paint to do large washes. Here's how you open the tube. These paints are highly pigmented, so you won't usually need to squeeze out too much. Don't worry if you have paint left over though, you can save it on the palette and reactivate it with water later. There are some symbols on the back of the tube. This one refers to the transparency of the paint, from transparent to opaque. These symbols indicate the light fastness of the paint. And these are the pigments that form the paint colour. Let's explore some of the basic techniques and terminology. This is not an exhaustive list, but it's a great place to start. We're going to be practicing and using all of these techniques in this course, so don't get too caught up in trying to remember all of them right now. Generally speaking, you'll be working from light to dark. The paper provides the white or highlight areas, and the paint provides the shadows and colours. A flat wash is a technique to create a flat, tonally even area of paint. Blending can be used to create any transition in tone or colour. This is a gradient, and can be from one colour to another, or from transparent to opaque. Negative painting is a technique that typically leaves the foreground objects lighter than those in the background. Glazing or layering is the process of layering up wet paint over dry paint to alter the tone or the colour. Wet on wet or wet in wet is any technique that applies wet paint to a wet surface. That could be a thin layer of water or paint. It's great for creating blends, gradients and soft blurry effects. Wet on dry is any technique where you're applying wet paint to a dry surface. It can be used for creating hard edges or blends or flat washes. Dry on dry, also known as dry brush, is applying paint with a relatively dry brush to dry paper, and it's great for creating fine detail and ragged feathery strokes. If you need to fix mistakes, and trust me, there's going to be a few, then start by washing the mistake off with an ample amount of water. You can scrub the paper gently with the brush, but be careful not to scrub too hard, or the paper's surface will start to pile up. Then you can pick up the water by gently dabbing it with a tissue or with a clean dry brush. The darker and more staining the paint, the harder it will be to remove a mistake. And last but not least, a great way to think about watercolor and the way it works is that when the paint is wet, it is editable, and when it dries, it's no longer editable. There's a couple of things I'd like you to bear in mind as you work through this course. Firstly, there are going to be a lot of mistakes, but this isn't skydiving. If you really screw up, you're not going to die. And when you make those mistakes, I don't want you to abandon the painting. Instead, complete it the best you can. Improvement takes time, and by abandoning a painting halfway through, you're missing out on vital time practicing different skills. Also, because watercolor usually involves layering up paints, by the time you're finished, mistakes can quite often no longer be visible. Secondly, I'd like you to stop being precious about your paintings. It's really easy to feel protective of them. One of the many skills you're going to develop is knowing when to stop painting before you overwork it. But the only way you're going to learn that is by going too far, a lot. So don't worry if you ruin 1,000 paintings. Work quickly, throw the results in the bin. The skills you'll be developing by following these lessons are the important thing, not the paintings themselves. You can always make another painting. And because you'll always be progressing, your next painting will be even better than the one you've just completed. The more things you try out and the more mistakes you make, the quicker you're going to progress. Thirdly, give yourself a break. It doesn't matter if you can't get the hang of a technique right away. All of it is practice, and every time you practice, you'll be contributing to a skill which takes a long time and a lot of effort to develop. Enjoy the journey. By the time you finish this course, you'll be much better than you are now. And most importantly, before starting the course, make sure you subscribe. It will keep you up to date with all the great tutorials we've got coming your way. Thanks for watching. I'm super excited you're starting your watercolor journey with us. Best of luck and catch you in the next tutorial.